I stood at the edge of the manicured lawn, the cold morning air biting at my cheeks. The scent of fresh-cut grass usually brought me a quiet peace, but today it was sharp, like a slap. My daughter-in-law Maribel stood on the porch, a cruel, self-satisfied smile on her face. Behind her, in the living room, a place I had called home for 43 years, my son Lowell was a ghost, a silhouette of a man who wouldn't meet my gaze. Two worn suitcases, holding what little was left of my life, sat beside me on the pavement. I wanted to scream, to ask them how they could do this. I wanted to beg for just one more day, but the words were caught in my throat, choked by the lump of betrayal. This was it. The end. Before I begin this story, can you tell me where in the world you're listening to from? It's funny, the things you remember when your world is collapsing. I remember the smell of Jareth's old leather jacket, the way he would sit in his armchair on a Sunday morning, sipping coffee and reading the paper. The house was small, but it was ours. We bought it when we were just a couple of kids with big dreams and empty pockets. We painted every wall, laid every floorboard, and planted every rosebush in the yard. It wasn't a house. It was a testament to a life lived together, a book filled with stories of joy and sorrow. We raised our son Lowell here. We watched him grow from a clumsy boy to a kind, quiet man. That kindness was the thing I loved most about him. It was a reflection of his father, a gentle spirit in a world that often felt harsh. My life was simple, predictable, and full of a quiet contentment. It was enough. That quiet contentment began to crack the day Lowell brought Maribel home. She was a vision, tall and slender, with a sharp jawline and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She didn't look at the house with warmth. She looked at it with a calculating efficiency, as if mentally cataloging every flaw, every outdated fixture. She told me the wallpaper was quaint and the furniture was a throwback. It was said with a polite smile, but the words felt like a judgment. I tried to welcome her. I cooked her Jareth's favorite casserole, a dish that always brought a smile to his face. She ate a few bites and then pushed the plate away, claiming she was a vegetarian. Lowell apologized later, but I saw the strain on his face. Maribel was a force, and he was already bending to her will. I told myself it was just a mother's paranoia. A part of me, though, knew something was off. It was the feeling you get when you're standing on a perfectly solid floor, but a low rumble tells you an earthquake is coming. The cracks were there, I just didn't want to see them. I wanted to believe that the boy I had raised would always be the boy who loved this house, the one who would protect it and me, the one who would understand the memories woven into every creak and every loose floorboard. But I saw the way he looked at her. He saw a future I didn't understand, and he was already choosing it over the past he knew. I started to notice how Maribel subtly began to change things. She brought over a new set of towels, crisp and white, and replaced the faded ones my sister had embroidered for me. She reorganized the kitchen, moving all the mismatched mugs into a box in the garage. She had a way of making it seem like she was helping, but each small change felt like a tiny wound. It was a quiet invasion, a slow erasure of the life Jareth and I had built. I bit my tongue and smiled, because I wanted to be the loving mother-in-law. I wanted to believe that this was just her way of nesting, of making our home her own. But it wasn't. It was about control. It was about taking over. It was about a future I was not a part of. Lowell saw none of it. Or maybe he saw it and chose to ignore it. He was blinded by her. The light in his eyes, the kind, gentle light that had always been there, was now dimmed, replaced by a quiet anxiety, a constant need to appease her. He was no longer the boy I raised. He was her boy now, and I was just a visitor in my own home. I started to feel like a stranger in a place I knew by heart. The floorboards that I knew would creak in the hallway were no longer my secret. They were now just loud, outdated flaws in a home that was no longer mine. The old photos on the mantel, the ones of a younger Jareth and a young Lowell, started to feel like a distant, disconnected memory. I was an anachronism, a remnant, and Maribel was the future. I felt a coldness settle in my heart, a premonition of the loneliness to come. The distance between Lowell and me grew into a chasm. He no longer called me just to chat. His calls were brief, transactional. "What do you need?" Or "Maribel wants to know if you can go to the store." I found myself nodding along, agreeing to everything she wanted just to feel a connection with him, a single thread holding us together. I saw the disappointment in his eyes whenever I didn't immediately agree, and it broke my heart a little more each time. Maribel always stood in the background, a silent observer. I knew she was the reason. I knew she was pulling the strings. I told myself she was just trying to protect Lowell. I told myself she was a good person, just misunderstood. But the truth was, she was a predator. She saw a quiet, unsuspecting family, and she saw an opportunity to seize control, an opportunity to build a new life for herself, one that was grand and lavish, one that had no room for a quiet house or a simple old woman. I saw her look at my house with a cold, hungry glint in her eyes. I had a terrible feeling she wasn't just planning to move in with Lowell, she was planning to take it all. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. The warmth of the house, the one I had known for all those years, started to feel like a memory. The sunlight that streamed through the windows felt like a stranger's light. The air felt heavy, filled with an unspoken threat. I was losing my home, and I was losing my son. I was losing everything, and I was powerless to stop it. Maribel came from a family of sharp edges and sharper minds. Her father Oswin ran a chain of pawnshops, each one a testament to his knack for squeezing the last drop of value out of a person's misfortune. Her mother, Odessa, was a real estate agent, who could sell a condemned building with a straight face and a smile. They taught their children that life was a transaction, and that emotional attachments were liabilities. I saw this in Maribel's quick, assessing gaze. She never just looked at an object, she appraised it. I had tried to get to know her, to find some common ground, but every conversation felt like a negotiation. I told her stories about Jareth, about our life, about the small joys of our simple existence. She listened with a vacant politeness, as if she were waiting for me to finish so she could get to the point. One afternoon, while we were cleaning out an old cabinet, she picked up a teacup. It was a beautiful thing, hand-painted with delicate blue flowers. A gift from Jareth on our 10th anniversary. She held it up to the light, not to admire it, but to check for cracks. "Is this real porcelain?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Jareth got it for me," I said. She set it back down on the counter with a loud clatter. A piece of the delicate handle chipped off and fell to the floor. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "It's just a teacup. We can get you a new one." The casual dismissal of its sentimental value was a slap in the face. It was the first time she had shown me her true disregard for things that couldn't be measured in money. It was a sign of what was to come. I tried to talk to Lowell about it. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about the teacup, but about the coldness in her voice, the way she could break something and not feel a thing. He listened, but his eyes were already clouded over. He told me I was being too sensitive, that Maribel was just being practical. "She doesn't understand," he said, and I knew he wasn't talking about the teacup. He was talking about me. He was telling me that my simple, sentimental way of life was foreign to her, and that I needed to change. I felt a deep sadness settle over me. My son was apologizing for her callousness. He was trying to justify her behavior. He was choosing her side. The house started to feel smaller, the walls closing in on me. I spent my days cleaning and cooking, trying to find some solace in the familiar routines. But even the routines felt different. The air was filled with a tension I couldn't shake. Maribel's presence was a constant humming undercurrent of judgment. She would stand in the doorway, watching me dust the bookshelves, and her silence was louder than any criticism. I felt like an exhibit in a museum, a relic from a past she was determined to demolish. I started to hide things. Old photo albums, Jareth's worn-out fishing hat, a small chipped ceramic bird that sat on the windowsill for years. I tucked them away in the back of closets and the bottom of drawers, trying to protect the small pieces of my life that still meant something. I was a squirrel, hoarding memories, knowing that winter was coming. And I was right. The coldness between Maribel and me solidified into a polite but impenetrable wall. We would have short, stilted conversations about the weather or the price of groceries, but we never spoke of anything that mattered. She had a way of turning every question into a fact, every feeling into a number. When I told her how much I missed Jareth, she responded with a list of funeral arrangements she had made and a spreadsheet of expenses. I felt like a client, not a family member. One evening, after Lowell had gone to bed, I sat in the living room listening to the quiet of the house. I could hear Maribel on the phone in the other room, her voice a low, urgent whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was all business. She was talking about money, about percentages and investments. I felt a chill run down my spine. The money from the lawsuit wasn't just a windfall for her, it was a weapon. She was already planning something, and I had a terrible feeling I was a part of it. The darkness of the room seemed to press in on me. The house, which had always been a sanctuary, felt like a cage. I was trapped, a pawn in a game I didn't know I was playing, and I was scared. I was scared of what she was capable of, and I was even more scared of my son's complicity. I tried to reach out to Lowell again. I baked him a batch of his favorite cookies, the ones he used to eat by the handful when he was a boy. I brought them to his room and found him sitting on his bed, a defeated look on his face. Maribel was on a laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. He took a cookie, but didn't eat it. He just held it in his hand, crumbling it between his fingers. "Mom?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Maribel, she knows what she's doing. She has a plan." He didn't look at me when he said it, and I knew in that moment that I had lost him. He was a passenger on her train, and the destination was unknown to him. She looked up from her laptop, a sharp smile on her face. "Lowell," she said, her voice a warning. He flinched. The cookie crumbled to the floor, and I knew that my quiet, kind boy was gone, replaced by a frightened stranger. I walked out of the room, leaving the cookies behind, the scent of them filling the air like a bitter memory. My heart ached, a deep, hollow pain. My son was being controlled, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I was losing him to a woman who saw him not as a man but as a tool to be used and manipulated. Jareth's illness hit us like a storm. One day he was tending to his rose bushes, humming a tune, and the next he was lying in a hospital bed, a tangle of wires and tubes. The doctor's words were a blur of technical terms, but the meaning was simple. He was dying. I spent every waking moment at his side, holding his hand, telling him stories of our life together. I saw him fading, a little more each day. Maribel was efficient. She handled the insurance paperwork, organized a schedule for hospital visits, and made sure there were no loose ends. She never held his hand, never told him a story. She looked at him as if he were a project, a problem to be solved. I was too consumed by my grief to see her for what she was. I was a person drowning, and she was a life preserver. Even a cold one was better than nothing. But I saw the way she looked at Lowell, a sort of silent demand. She wanted him to be as composed, as practical, as she was. He was struggling. He would come to the hospital and sit in silence, tears streaming down his face, and Maribel would just stand there, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. She didn't understand the emotional toll. She didn't understand grief. After Jareth was gone, the house felt empty, the silence a physical weight. I found myself wandering from room to room, touching his things, trying to feel his presence. Maribel was there too, but her presence was a disruption. She insisted on organizing his belongings, on getting rid of things she considered clutter. I found her one afternoon, holding his fishing hat, the one with the faded pin from our trip to Yosemite. She held it with 2 fingers, as if it were a dead animal. "What do we do with this?" she asked. "It's ugly." I snatched it from her hand. "It's staying," I said, my voice trembling. She just shrugged and walked away. I clutched the hat to my chest, the musty smell of it bringing back a flood of memories. I felt like I was fighting for every inch of my life, every memory, every small piece of the man I loved. I was exhausted. My grief was a heavy cloak, and Maribel's callousness was a cold rain seeping through. I missed Jareth so much. I missed the way he would just know what I needed, without me ever having to say a word. I missed his quiet strength, the way he made me feel safe. Now, with him gone, I felt utterly alone. I was adrift in a sea of grief, and the only person who was supposed to be my anchor was a stranger. My son was gone too. A ghost. Maribel's presence in the house became a constant reminder of my helplessness. She and Lowell had moved in, under the guise of helping me through this. But it wasn't help, it was an occupation. She was like a slow-moving flood, creeping into every corner of my life. She rearranged the furniture, replaced the lamps, and hung up new pictures of her and Lowell. My family photos, the ones of our vacations, our birthdays, our life, were all gone. I found them stacked in a box in the garage, a tombstone for my memories. I felt a fierce anger well up inside me. I was losing my mind, my home, my son. I went to her and demanded an explanation. "We're making this a family home," she said, her voice smooth and devoid of emotion. "It's about new memories, not old ones." The words were like tiny razors, slicing me open, one by one. I saw the look on Lowell's face, a look of pure misery. He knew what she was doing. He saw the pain in my eyes, and yet he didn't say a word. The silence was the worst part. The silence of his betrayal, the silence of his cowardice. He just stood there watching her tear my life apart, brick by brick. He was a prisoner in his own home, a prisoner to her will, and I was no better. A prisoner of my own sorrow. I went to my room and closed the door, the click of the lock a small comfort. It was the only part of the house I still had, the only place where I could still be me. One day while I was sorting through Jareth's old things, I found a small locked box in the back of his closet. I had never seen it before. It was a sturdy thing, made of dark polished wood, with a small brass lock. A faded tag on the front read, "Don't open." A note from Jareth. I sat on the floor, the box heavy in my hands. What was inside? A secret. A past he had kept from me. I wanted to open it, to understand what he had left me. But I also wanted to respect his wishes. The box felt like a part of him, a part I didn't know. A secret buried in my own home. I was afraid of what I would find, afraid of another truth to add to the pile of betrayals. The box was a new mystery, a new puzzle. I didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I just knew it was something. I tucked it away under the floorboards of my bedroom closet, a secret of my own now. I had something they didn't. Something that belonged only to me and Jareth. A small, defiant act of reclaiming my life. A secret that would one day either save me or destroy me. The first sign of the real danger came in the mail. A certified letter addressed to Jareth. I had opened it, thinking it was a bill or some final piece of legal work. Instead, it was a demand letter from a debt collection agency. A massive debt. A lien on the house. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Jareth and I had always been so careful with money. We had no secrets. Or so I thought. I confronted Lowell with the letter, my hands shaking. Maribel read it over his shoulder, a small, knowing smile on her face. "He never told you about his past business dealings, did he?" she asked. I had no idea what she was talking about. She then told me a fabricated story of Jareth's gambling problems and bad investments from before we met, claiming he had been hiding it from me for years. It was a lie. A cruel, vicious lie designed to erode my trust in the man I love. My head swam with a mix of anger and grief. Lowell stood by silently, looking at the floor. He knew it wasn't true, but he didn't say a word. He just let her slander his father, the man who had raised him with nothing but love and honesty. The lie hung in the air, a poisonous fog, and I felt myself shrinking inside. Maribel immediately took over. "We have to fix this," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. She insisted that I sign a power of attorney, giving her control of all my financial affairs. "It's the only way to save the house," she said, her voice a calm, logical siren song. I hesitated. My gut told me this was a mistake, but my heart was broken. My mind was clouded by grief and the shock of this supposed debt. She had a way of presenting things as the only logical solution. She had a file full of legal documents, each one more complicated than the last. She had already spoken to a lawyer, a man named Sterling, and he had confirmed that this was the only way. I was so tired of fighting. I just wanted the pain to stop. Lowell, for his part, tried to convince me. "Mom, please," he said, his voice pleading. "Maribel knows what she's doing. She's just trying to help." I looked at his desperate face, the face of the boy I had raised, and I signed. I signed my name on the dotted line, and with that single act, I handed over my life. Maribel's smile was triumphant. She had won, and I was left with a cold, sinking dread. The debt, the papers, the complicity of my son, it all felt like a trap, and I had walked right into it. The lien was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion to make me believe I was in danger. Maribel, with her father's network of contacts, had manufactured the debt and the legal threat. She had told the story to a few of my neighbors, and the gossip spread like wildfire. I saw the pity in their eyes, the way they would look away when I tried to talk to them. I was a broken woman, the widow who had been betrayed by her husband. I was a tragic figure. It was a brilliant, cruel maneuver. By isolating me, by making me feel ashamed and embarrassed, she had ensured that I would have no one to turn to. I was alone. I was convinced that I had no options, no way out. Maribel had me in a cage of her own making, and the bars were made of shame and loneliness. Lowell never said a word about it. He just looked at me with a sad, defeated gaze. He was a spectator in my own destruction. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him and ask him how he could let her do this. But what would be the point? He was a puppet, and her hand was firmly on the strings. The air in the house grew heavier. Every move I made, every breath I took felt watched. Maribel had taken control of my bank account, my bills, my life. She would give me a small allowance each week, barely enough to buy groceries. She would review my purchases with a cold, professional eye. "Are these necessary?" she would ask, holding up a receipt for a book of crossword puzzles. I felt like a child, a burden, a charity case. I was a person living in my own home, but I had no ownership. I had no control. I tried to talk to her, to explain that I was an adult, that I was a person who had lived a full life before she arrived. She would just smile, that same cold, polite smile, and tell me she was doing this for my own good. She was protecting me, and in my state of grief and shock, I almost believed her. She was a master manipulator, and I was her willing victim. I had given her a key to my life, and she was already using it to lock me out. I was a ghost, a presence that was no longer welcome, and I knew that soon I would be gone for good. The house was no longer a home. It was a holding cell. I waited for the final verdict, the last act of a play I never wanted to be in. The first thing to go was Jareth's old hunting rifle. It had hung over the fireplace for as long as I could remember, a symbol of his love for the outdoors. It was his father's, and his father's before that. A family heirloom. Maribel had looked at it one afternoon, her head tilted, a glint in her eye. She had an app on her phone that could appraise items. She told me it was worth a few $1,000s. "We could really use this," she said. "Think of it as a down payment on a new life." I protested. Of course. I told her it was a family heirloom, that it was a part of my husband. She just shrugged, a cold indifference in her eyes. Lowell stood there too, watching, his hands in his pockets. He said nothing. The next day 2 men came and took it away. It was a silent, gut-wrenching moment. A piece of Jareth was gone, sold for a few $1,000s. The empty space above the fireplace was a gaping hole. It was the first of many such moments. She sold my mother's old jewelry box, my grandmother's rocking chair, even the old record player that Jareth and I had danced to on our wedding night. Each piece sold felt like a limb being amputated. I was being dismantled, one memory at a time. The house was being stripped of its soul, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The house became a revolving door of appraisers, antique dealers, and Maribel would have them come over, and she would walk them through the house, pointing out items she wanted to sell. She would describe their value, their history, their potential for profit. She never once mentioned the memories, the stories, the love. To her they were just objects, things to be monetized. I would hide in my bedroom, listening to the muffled voices, the low rumble of negotiations, the sound of my life being sold off piece by piece. Sometimes a buyer would ask to see something in my room. Maribel would knock on the door, a polite but firm urgency in her voice. "It's for a collection," she would say. I would open the door and she would sweep in, her eyes scanning the room, looking for things to sell. It was a violation. I felt like a caged animal, my space invaded, my privacy stripped away. I started to resent her, a low simmer of anger that was quickly turning into a burning rage. She was a thief. But she wasn't stealing, she was selling. She was a master of the legal, of the contractual, of the paperwork that made theft look like a transaction, and I was the one who had signed away my right to protest. Maribel's help had a price. She informed me that she was not only handling the finances, but was also providing a service. She charged a management fee for her time and energy. It was a subtle, insidious way of making me feel like a debtor. She would hand me a weekly allowance for groceries, and it was never enough. I would have to go to the pawn shops to sell off my remaining personal items just to make ends meet. I saw the look on the faces of the people I sold to. They saw a woman with nothing, a tragic figure. They saw what I was, a victim. It made me feel so small, so ashamed. I was living in a nightmare of my own making, a financial prison that was slowly closing in on me. I tried to talk to Lowell about it, but he just shook his head. "She's just being smart," he said. "She's making sure we don't go broke." He had no idea what she was doing. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care. The thought of him knowing, of him being complicit in this, was a new, deeper pain. It was a pain that felt worse than the grief of losing Jareth. It was a pain that felt like a hole in my chest. I was losing my son to a woman who saw the world as a game, and saw me as a pawn. I found a small, forgotten bank statement in the back of my closet, tucked inside an old book of poems. It was from Jareth. It was a statement from a bank I didn't recognize, and the address was on the other side of town. The amount was small, but it was there, and it was in Jareth's name. A glimmer of hope. Maybe he had a secret account, a small rainy day fund. Maybe he had known this would happen. Maybe he had prepared for it. The thought of him, in his final days, planning for my future, gave me a small spark of defiance. I felt a surge of energy, a new determination. This was not the end. I had a secret of my own now. I had a way to fight back. I had a way to reclaim my life. The bank statement was a small piece of paper, but it was a lifeline. It was a sign that I was not alone. It was a sign that Jareth had not forgotten me. I felt the cold dread that had been clinging to me start to recede. I was no longer a victim. I was a fighter, and I was going to fight for my home, for my son, and for the memory of the man I loved. I was at the local pharmacy, picking up a prescription, when I saw it. The newspaper rack, filled with the daily paper, the headline in bold, black letters, screamed at me, "Local woman wins $67 million in landmark lawsuit." I froze. The photo below the headline was of Maribel. She was standing outside a courtroom, a triumphant smile on her face, holding a thick folder. I felt a jolt of ice-cold dread go through me. My mind reeled. A lawsuit? $67 million? The article went on to detail a long-standing legal battle between Maribel's family and a tech company. The company had stolen a patent for a software design that her father, Oswin, had created years ago. They had been fighting it for years and they had finally won. The total amount was $67, $4 million to be split between Maribel and her siblings. My hands started to shake. I could barely breathe. The debt, the papers, the power of attorney, the lie about Jareth. It was all a sham. She had been preparing for this. She had been systematically stripping me of my control, my resources, and my dignity, so that when the money came, she would have a clean path to take over everything. I stumbled out of the store, the newspaper clutched in my hand. My mind was a maelstrom of anger and disbelief. All of my memories, all of the pieces of my life she had sold, flashed before my eyes. All of it for nothing. All of it for her. I walked straight to my house, the rage a fire in my veins. I found her in the living room, on her phone. She was on a speakerphone, her voice a low purr. "Yes, the contract is ironclad," she was saying. "The house will be ours by the end of the month." I dropped the newspaper on the coffee table. She looked at me, and her eyes for the first time were not polite. They were cold, hard and full of triumph. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. She just laughed, a short, sharp burst of sound that cut through me. "It was just a matter of timing," she said. "The house was a valuable asset, and it was in disrepair. It needed to be sold." She said it as if she were talking about a car. I felt a raw, searing pain in my chest. She was not a person. She was a machine that had been programmed to take and take and take. I looked at her, and I saw a stranger, not the girl who had come into my life, but a monster. I had to find out if Lowell knew. I had to know if he was a part of this. I found him in the garage, tinkering with an old car. "Lowell," I said, my voice shaking. "Did you know?" He didn't look at me. He just kept his head down, his hands working on the engine. "Did you know about the money? Did you know she was going to do this?" I was begging him for an answer. I was begging him for a reason, a justification, a sign that he was still the boy I had raised. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of a deep self-loathing. "I didn't know about the money," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Not at first. She told me it was a business deal, that we would be comfortable. He admitted to being a part of the lie. He admitted to being complicit. He had stood by and watched her tear my life apart. And for what? A few $1 million? A life of luxury? He had traded his mother for a check. I felt a coldness spread through me. It was a coldness that felt worse than the one I had felt when Jareth died. This was a coldness born of betrayal, of a love that was gone forever. I went back inside, the newspaper still lying on the coffee table like a crime scene photo. Maribel was still on the phone. She was laughing now, a light, carefree sound. She was talking about a new house, a mansion, a place with a pool and a view. She was planning her future, a future that had no room for me. I felt a flash of white-hot anger. I was not going to be cast aside. I was not going to let them win. I grabbed the newspaper and ripped it in half. I threw the pieces on the floor, the sound of the paper tearing like a gunshot. Maribel looked at me, and her smile vanished. She saw the look in my eyes. She saw the rage, the defiance, the new determination. She knew I was a fighter now, and she knew that her little game was about to change. I looked at her, and I saw a monster, and I knew that from this moment on it was me against her. It was me against them. It was me against everything they had done to me. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was going to fight for my life. She stood there, frozen, the phone still to her ear. She was silent, but her eyes were full of a new, unsettling fear. She had taken everything from me, but she didn't know what I had hidden away. She didn't know about the box. The air in the house was thick with unspoken tension. The celebratory mood that should have accompanied Maribel's massive windfall was non-existent. Instead, there was a palpable coldness, a silence that felt louder than any argument. Maribel and Lowell began to talk in hushed tones behind closed doors. I could hear their voices, low and urgent. They were planning their new life, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that I was not a part of it. I found a list she had made, a list of things to sell. My name was at the bottom, crossed out. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach. What did she mean? Was she planning to move me to a nursing home? To a shelter? I had no idea. The thought of losing the house, the physical, tangible thing that represented my life with Jareth, was a pain I couldn't bear. I had to confront her. I had to know. I found her in the kitchen, sorting through mail, her face a mask of cold concentration. What do you mean by this? I asked, my voice shaking, holding up the list. She didn't even look up from her papers. Oh, she said, her voice flat. It's about the house. It's time for us to move on, and you're a part of the transaction. I stood there, stunned. The transaction? I said, my voice rising. This is my home, my life. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were empty. It's a property, she said. And properties have value. We're offering you a fair price, a little over what you would get from a typical buyer, and we're giving you a grace period to move out. It's a very generous offer. I felt a furious, blinding rage. Generous? I screamed. You've been selling off my things, lying about my husband's past, and now you want to buy my home out from under me. She just sighed, a sound of profound boredom. It's not personal, Cassia, she said, using my full name, a formality that felt like a slap. It's just business. The words hung in the air, a final cruel verdict. This wasn't about family, about love, about me. It was about money. It was about a future she had already planned, a future that had no room for me. And Lowell, my son, stood in the doorway, a look of profound defeat on his face. He said nothing. The silence was louder than her words. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, and I saw a stranger. He was a man who had traded his mother for a check, a man who had chosen a monster over his family. I was a broken woman, a mother without a son. He finally spoke, his voice a low, defeated whisper. Mom, he said, his eyes full of tears. She's right. It's for the best. We can't take care of you, not with all the new responsibilities. I felt a new pain, a pain so deep it felt like it would never heal. He was apologizing for her cruelty. He was trying to justify his own cowardice. I looked at him, and I saw a man who had lost his soul. He had chosen money over family, greed over love. And now he was a prisoner, a puppet on a string, and she was the puppeteer, The air was thick with the weight of their betrayal. I felt a coldness spread through me. It was a coldness that felt worse than the one I had felt when Jareth died. This was a coldness born of betrayal, of a love that was gone forever. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. The next few days were a blur of coldness and silence. They spoke to me only to remind me of the deadline. 3 weeks, Cassia. Don't forget to pack your things. I was a ghost in my own home, my presence a constant reminder of their treachery. I spent my days in my bedroom, surrounded by what little was left of my life. I went to the old box, the one Jareth had left me, and I took out the key. The key felt heavy in my hand, a small cold comfort. I had a secret now, a secret that could turn the tables. I didn't know what was in that box, but I had a feeling it was my one shot at redemption. I had to find a way to get to that bank, to open that box, and to find out what Jareth had left me. I had to know if he had foreseen this, if he had tried to protect me from the woman who had stolen his son. The thought of him in his final days, planning for my future, gave me a small spark of defiance. I felt a surge of energy, a new determination. This was not the end. I had a secret of my own now, and I was going to use it. I was going to fight for my home, for my life, for my soul. The envelope was thick and heavy, with the return address of a law office I didn't recognize. I opened it with trembling hands, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a formal eviction notice. The language was cold, legal, and final. It stated that I had 30 days to vacate the premises, or face legal action. My hands went numb and the paper fell to the floor. I felt a deep, hollow ache in my stomach. The papers I had signed, the ones that Maribel had told me were to secure my future, were a legal agreement to sell my home to them at a predetermined, laughably low price. She had been planning this all along. The supposed loan was a way to get me to sign over my rights. The lawyer's name on the bottom of the notice was Sterling, the same man Maribel had told me she had been consulting. He was not a neutral party, he was her accomplice. I felt sick. The betrayal was so complete, so all-encompassing, that it took my breath away. She had not only taken my money, my home and my son, she had taken my trust, my belief in the goodness of people. She had poisoned my world. I confronted Maribel, the eviction notice clutched in my hand. My voice was a furious whisper. "You knew," I said. "You knew what you were doing all along." She just smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. "It was the only logical way to proceed," she said, her voice soft and sweet, a horrifying contrast to the cruelty in her eyes. "The market is very hot right now. We'll be able to sell this place for a good price, and you'll have a new beginning." A new beginning? A new beginning in a homeless shelter? A new beginning in a park bench? The words were a mockery. She had no idea what she had done to me. She had no idea that she had just ripped my heart out and stomped on it. I looked at Lowell and he just looked away, his face a mask of shame and defeat. He was a ghost in his own life, a puppet on a string, and she was the puppeteer. He couldn't even look me in the eye. He was a coward and he had chosen her over me. I felt a raw, searing pain in my chest. It was a pain that felt worse than the grief of losing Jareth. This was a pain that felt like a hole in my soul. I was a person without a home, a mother without a son. I was a person without a future. I spent the next few days in a haze of grief and anger. I started to pack, but every object I touched, every book, every photo, every piece of clothing, felt like a betrayal. I was packing up my life, the life I had built with Jareth, the life I had shared with my son, the life that was now gone. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. Maribel would come in and she would stand in the doorway, a silent, triumphant witness to my suffering. She would smile and I would feel a fresh wave of nausea. She was a monster, a creature of pure greed and cruelty. I had tried to be a good mother-in-law. I had tried to welcome her into my life, and this was my reward. A handful of papers, a cold eviction notice, and a future of nothingness. I looked at my home, the place I had loved, and I saw a house full of ghosts. The ghost of Jareth, the ghost of a happy life, the ghost of my son, all gone, and I knew that soon I would be gone too. A ghost in a world that no longer had a place for me. The emptiness in my house was a tangible thing. It was a cold, silent presence that followed me from room to room. Maribel's belongings had already started to arrive. New furniture, expensive art, a new set of towels. My things were pushed into boxes, the old life giving way to the new. I felt a sense of profound sadness. My home was being erased, my memories being packed away. I was a person without a past, a person without a future. I had no idea where I was going to go. I had no money, no family, no friends. She had taken it all. She had left me with nothing. The only thing I had left was the old wooden box, the one Jareth had left me. The one I hadn't opened, the one that was my last hope. I was a woman with a secret, and I knew that soon I would have to use it. I had to find a way to get to that bank. I had to find out what Jareth had left me. I had to know if he had foreseen this, if he had tried to protect me from the woman who had stolen his son. The thought of him, in his final days, planning for my future, gave me a small spark of defiance. I felt a surge of energy, a new determination. This was not the end. I had a secret of my own now, and I was going to use it. I was going to fight for my home, for my life, for my soul. The day came, cold and gray, the last of my belongings. A few worn suitcases sat by the curb. Maribel stood on the porch, her arms crossed, watching with a cold satisfaction. She looked down at me, a cruel smile on her face. "Don't worry," she said, her voice a low purr. "We'll be sure to put a little plaque on the door. The Cassia Suite. We'll be sure to remember you." My heart seized in my chest. The words were a knife twisting in a wound that was still fresh. She was not just kicking me out, she was mocking me. She was a monster, a creature of pure evil. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could be so cruel. But the words were caught in my throat, choked by the lump of betrayal. I looked at Lowell, who was standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the floor. He couldn't look at me. He was a coward, and he had chosen her over me. He had chosen money, greed, and a life of luxury over his own mother. He was a ghost, and I was a stranger. My son was gone forever. I felt a profound sadness, a loneliness so deep, it felt like it would never heal. I was a person without a home, a mother without a son. I was a person without a future. I walked away without looking back. I couldn't bear to see the house, the place that had been my home for 43 years, now a testament to my defeat. I walked for hours, the cold biting at my cheeks, the suitcases heavy in my hands. I was a refugee in my own town, a stranger in a world that no longer had a place for me. I finally made it to the Greyhound bus station. I bought a ticket with the last of my money, a one-way ticket to a town I had never heard of. I sat on a bench, the cold metal seeping through my worn coat, and I watched the world go by. The people on the street, the cars, the buses, they all seemed so happy, so carefree. They had homes, they had families, they had lives. I was a ghost in their world, an invisible person with a broken heart. I was so alone. I had no one to call, no one to turn to, no one to tell my story to. Maribel had made sure of that. She had isolated me, poisoned my reputation, and left me with nothing. The bus ride was a blur of misery. I sat by the window, watching the landscape fly by, the world outside a strange foreign place. My life was a memory now, a collection of moments that had no connection to my present reality. I was a person without a past, a person without a future. I had no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I was lost. The only thing I had left was the old wooden box, the one Jareth had left me. The one I hadn't opened, the one that was my last hope. I was a woman with a secret, and I knew that soon I would have to use it. I had to find a way to get to that bank. I had to find out what Jareth had left me. I had to know if he had foreseen this, if he had tried to protect me from the woman who had stolen his son. The thought of him, in his final days, planning for my future, gave me a small spark of defiance. I felt a surge of energy, a new determination. This was not the end. I had a secret of my own now, and I was going to use it. I was going to fight for my home, for my life, for my soul. I finally arrived in a small, dusty town, a place that felt like it had been fargoed by time. I found a cheap motel, a place with flickering lights and a musty smell. I checked in, the worn key in my hand, feeling like a mockery of the key to my home. I was a person with a room, but I had no home. I was a person with a bed, but I had no comfort. I lay on the worn-out mattress, the rough sheets scratching at my skin, and I finally let the tears fall. The tears were a flood, a deluge of pain, grief, and anger. I cried for my husband, for my son, for the life I had lost. I cried for the woman I used to be, the woman who had a home and a family and a sense of security, the woman who was now a ghost, a remnant of a past that was gone forever. I was alone, utterly and completely alone, in a strange foreign place, and I had a feeling that I was not going to be able to leave. I was a prisoner, and the bars were made of my own grief. My days in the motel were a blur of loneliness and despair. The walls were thin, and I could hear the muffled conversations of the people next door, the TV in the other room. The sounds were a constant, nagging reminder of my isolation. I had no one to talk to, no one to share my misery with. I spent my days staring at the flickering TV, the images on the screen, a strange, disconnected reality. I tried to call Lowell, but he never answered. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried to call my friends, but they had all been poisoned by Maribel's lies. The pity in their voices was too much to bear. I felt a profound sense of abandonment. My world had shrunk to the size of a single motel room, and it was a cold, dark place. I was a person without a purpose, a person without a future. I had nothing to do, nowhere to go. My life was a blank slate, and I had no idea how to fill it. I was a person without a home, a mother without a son. I was a person without a soul. The only thing that kept me going was the old wooden box, the one Jareth had left me, the one I had hidden in my suitcase. I would sit on the bed, the box in my hands, and I would feel a sense of connection to him. It was a small comfort, but it was the only one I had. I knew I had to open it. I had to know what was inside. I had to know if it was a lifeline or a final cruel joke. I had to find a way to get to that bank. I had to find out what Jareth had left me. I had to know if he had foreseen this, if he had tried to protect me from the woman who had stolen his son. The thought of him, in his final days, planning for my future, gave me a small spark of defiance. I felt a surge of energy, a new determination. This was not the end. I had a secret of my own now, and I was going to use it. I was going to fight for my home, for my life, for my soul. I was a woman with a purpose now, a woman with a mission. And nothing was going to stop me. I decided to try to get a job, any job. I went to the local diner, a greasy spoon with a musty smell, and I asked for a job as a dishwasher. The owner, a man with a kind, wrinkled face, looked at me with a sense of pity. He could see that I was broken. He could see that I had no hope. He told me he was full, but he gave me a bowl of soup and a few kind words. I felt a profound sense of gratitude, a small kindness in a world that had become so cruel. The soup was warm and it filled a hole in my stomach, but it couldn't fill the hole in my heart. I was a person who had lost everything, and I had a feeling that I was not going to be able to get it back. I was a prisoner, and the bars were made of my own grief. I was a ghost in a world that no longer had a place for me. I was a person without a past, a person without a future. I was a person without a soul. The next day, I found a job at a local laundromat. It was a dirty, thankless job, but it was a job. I spent my days folding clothes, the smell of detergent and fabric softener a constant, nagging reminder of a life that was gone forever. I thought about the days I had spent in my own laundry room, folding clothes with Jareth. I thought about the way he would kiss me on the forehead, the way he would tell me I was the best wife in the world. I thought about the way he would laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that filled my heart with joy. The memories were a constant, nagging pain. I was a person who had lost everything, and I had a feeling that I was not going to be able to get it back. I was a prisoner, and the bars were made of my own grief. The laundromat was my prison. The folding of clothes, the smell of detergent, the sound of the washing machines, it was all a constant, nagging reminder of a life that was gone forever. I was a ghost in a world that no longer had a place for me. I was a person without a past, a person without a future. I was a person without a soul. I had to do something. One night, after a long day at the laundromat, I took the bus to the bank on the other side of town. The one Jareth's bank statement was from. It was a small, unassuming building, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest, and I went to the counter. I handed the teller the old bank statement. She looked at me, a sense of pity in her eyes, and she went to talk to her manager. I waited, my hands shaking. I had no idea what was going to happen. I had no idea what I was going to find. I was a person with no hope, a person with nothing to lose. I was a person who had lost everything, and I was about to find out if I had anything left. The manager, a kind, elderly man with a kind smile, came to the counter. He looked at the statement, and then he looked at me. "Are you Cassia?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Your husband, Jareth, he left you a message," he said, his voice soft. He handed me a small sealed envelope. My hands were shaking. I opened it, and I read the note. It was from Jareth. It said, "My love, I know you are going through a lot right now. I know you are feeling alone, but you are not. I have left you a secret that will protect you, a secret that will give you your life back. Go to the safety deposit box. The key is in the old box. Open it. Find your future, my love, Jareth." I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. Grief, a fresh wave of it. For the man who had loved me so much, a man who had known, a man who had planned, and hope, a new, powerful, blinding hope. I had a purpose now. I had a mission. I had to find that safety deposit box. I went to the locker and I put the key in the lock. The lock clicked and the door opened. Inside was a small, dusty box. I opened it, and I found a will written by Jareth, witnessed by a notary, that stated that the house could never be sold as long as I was alive. It was legally binding, and a letter to me, written in his beautiful cursive handwriting. It said that he had known about Maribel's family, about their ambition, about their ruthlessness. He had known that she would try to take advantage of me. He had planned this every step of the way. He had left me a way out, a way to reclaim my life, a way to fight back. He had been a ghost, a guardian angel, a secret protector. He had saved me from the woman who had stolen his son. The tears flowed freely, a mix of grief, gratitude, and a new powerful resolve. I was not alone. I had a protector. I had a future. I had a way to fight back. I was a woman with a purpose now, a woman with a mission, and nothing was going to stop me. I went to a local lawyer, a man with a kind, honest face, and I showed him the will. He read it, his eyes widening in disbelief. "This is a masterpiece," he said. "This is a legally binding document. You can get your house back." He told me it would be a fight, a long and difficult one, but that I had a strong case. I felt a surge of energy, a new determination. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was going to fight for my home, for my life, for my soul. I was going to fight for Jareth. I was going to fight for the man who had loved me so much. I was going to fight for the man who had saved me from the monster who had stolen his son. I was going to win, and I was going to do it for him. I was no longer a ghost in a world that had no place for me. I was a person with a purpose, a person with a mission. I had a future now, a future that was mine to create. I was a person who had lost everything, and I was about to get it all back. I was going to fight for my home, for my life, for my soul. And I was going to win. I was going to get my life back, piece by piece, memory by memory. I was going to get it all back. I was going to get my life back, and I was going to do it for him. I was a person who had a secret that was going to change everything, a secret that was going to turn the tables, a secret that was going to give me my life back, a secret that was going to change everything. My life had a new purpose. The days at the laundromat were no longer a prison. They were a means to an end. Every dollar I earned, every hour I spent folding clothes, was a step towards my goal. I was saving money for the lawyer. I was saving money for the fight. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman with a plan. The lawyer, a kind, honest man named Sterling, was my co-conspirator. He had read the will, and his eyes had lit up with a sense of righteous indignation. "This is a travesty," he had said. "We will not let them get away with this." His words were a balm to my soul. I was not alone. I had an ally. He told me that we had to be careful. Maribel was powerful. Her family was well connected. They would fight back, but we had the law on our side, and we had Jareth's will. The will was a masterpiece, a legally binding document that would be very difficult to contest. The notary was a friend of Jareth's, an honest man who would testify on our behalf. Jareth had thought of everything. He had protected me even after he was gone. He had given me a weapon, and now I was going to use it. I started to observe Maribel and Lowell from a distance. I would go to the grocery store she frequented, and I would see her, dressed in designer clothes, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. She looked like she had everything, but I knew she had nothing. She had no love, no kindness, no soul. She was a hollow shell filled with nothing but greed. I also saw Lowell. He looked miserable. He was thin, his shoulders slumped, his eyes full of a deep, profound sadness. He was not happy. The money had not brought him joy. It had brought him misery. He was a prisoner in his own home, a prisoner to her will. I felt a new pain, a pain that was different from the pain of betrayal. It was a pain of a mother watching her son suffer. I wanted to go to him, to hug him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but I couldn't. Not yet, not until I had a plan, not until I could save him. I had to wait. I had to be patient. I had to play the long game. My lawyer told me that the lawsuit would take time. He told me that we had to be prepared for a long and difficult fight. He told me that they would try to wear us down, to break us, to make us give up. But I was not going to give up. I had Jareth's will. I had a plan. I had a purpose. I was a woman who had lost everything, and I was about to get it all back. I was going to fight for my home, for my life, for my soul. I was going to win. I was going to get my life back, piece by piece, memory by memory. I was going to get it all back. I was going to get my life back, and I was going to do it for him. I was a person who had a secret that was going to change everything, a secret that was going to turn the tables, a secret that was going to give me my life back, a secret that was going to change everything. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was going to fight for my life, and I was going to win. Maribel's world started to crumble as quickly as it had been built. Her newfound wealth attracted the wrong kind of people. She threw lavish parties, bought expensive cars, and invested in a series of disastrous business ventures. Her arrogance grew, and she began to alienate everyone around her. She was a pariah, with people only wanting to use her. I saw the stories in the newspapers, the gossip on the internet. Local millionaire loses big and bad investment. Maribel's lavish lifestyle put strain on marriage. I felt a sense of vindication. She was getting what she deserved. The money had not brought her happiness. It had brought her misery. It had brought her ruin. She was a hollow shell, a person who had lost everything, even as she had it all. She had traded her soul for a check, and now she was paying the price. I saw her at a coffee shop one afternoon, and she looked haggard. Her eyes were tired, her face drawn. She was on the phone, her voice a low, frantic whisper. She was begging someone for a loan. I felt a sense of pity, a small, cold, satisfying sense of pity. She had everything, and she had nothing. I also saw Lowell. He looked like a ghost. He was thin, his shoulders slumped, his eyes full of a deep, profound sadness. He was not happy. The money had not brought him joy. It had brought him misery. He was a prisoner in his own home, a prisoner to her will. I felt a new pain, a pain that was different from the pain of betrayal. It was a pain of a mother watching her son suffer. I wanted to go to him, to hug him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had a plan. Not until I could save him. I had to wait. I had to be patient. I had to play the long game. The air in my world was filled with a new kind of tension, a new kind of anticipation. I knew that the climax was coming. I knew that the tables were about to turn. I knew that she was about to get what she deserved, and I was going to be there to witness it. I was going to be there to get my life back. The lawsuit against her for fraud, the one she had been fighting for months, was about to go to court. She had lied to the judge, she had lied to the jury. She had lied to everyone, but she couldn't lie to the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. She had fabricated a story about a patent that she had no right to, a story about a company she had no connection to. The only thing she had was a forged document, a document she had created with the help of her lawyer. But the lawyer had turned on her. He had testified against her. He had told the court that she had lied, that she had fabricated the entire thing. The jury was out. The verdict was coming. She was on the brink of ruin. She had lost everything. Even as she had it all, she had traded her soul for a check, and now she was paying the price. She was a hollow shell, a person who had nothing left to lose. And I was a person who had everything to gain. I was a person who had a secret that was going to change everything. The phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaking. "Cassia?" a voice said, a voice I didn't recognize. It was thin, reedy, and full of a desperate urgency. "It's Maribel." My heart seized in my chest. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her to leave me alone, to tell her that I was done with her. But something in her voice, a raw, naked terror, made me stay on the line. "What do you want?" I said, my voice cold. She just sobbed, a series of ragged, gasping sobs that felt like a mockery. I have nowhere to go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They took everything. The bank accounts, the house, the cars, everything. And the police. They are coming. They said I'm going to jail." My mind reeled. She had lost it all. The money, the house, the cars, all of it gone. And now she was on the run. She was a fugitive. I felt a sense of vindication, a small, cold, satisfying sense of justice. She had gotten what she deserved. "I need a place to stay," she said, her voice a desperate plea. "Just for a few days. Just until I can figure things out. Please, Cassia. Please." I felt a profound sense of irony. She was begging me, the woman she had thrown out of my own home, for a place to stay. The tables had turned. The power dynamic had flipped. She had a begging bowl now, and I was the one who was in control. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice still cold. I'm at the bus station," she said, her voice shaking. "I have nowhere to go. Lowell. He left me. He said he couldn't do it anymore. He said he was going to find you." My heart pounded in my chest. Lowell was gone. He had left her. He was coming for me. A new hope, a new joy, a new purpose filled me. He was coming back. He was coming home. I felt a profound sense of gratitude, a profound sense of relief. He was a good boy. He had just been lost. He had been a prisoner, and now he was free. He was a good boy, and he was coming home. "I can't let you in," I said, my voice still cold. "I don't have a home." She just sobbed. "I know," she said, her voice a whisper. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I should have never done this. I should have never taken your home. I should have never hurt you." The words were a bitter balm. They were a confession. They were an apology. But they were too little, too late. "I can't help you," I said. "You have to face the consequences of your actions." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. The phone rang again. It was Lowell. "Mom," he said, his voice a choked sob. "Where are you?" "I'm coming to get you. I'm coming home." The tears flowed freely, a mix of grief, gratitude, and a new, powerful resolve. He was coming home. He was coming back to me. He was a good boy. He had just been lost. He was a prisoner, and now he was free. He was a good boy, and he was coming home. The phone was a lifeline. I stood on the porch, my hands in my pockets, and watched as Lowell's truck pulled up. He got out, and he looked different. The defeated look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. He walked towards me, and he didn't say a word. He just hugged me. A long, tight, bone-crushing hug. He smelled like home. He smelled like the boy I had raised. He smelled like my son. I hugged him back, the tears flowing freely. A mix of grief, gratitude, and a new, powerful resolve. He was home. He was back. He was a good boy. He had just been lost. He had been a prisoner, and now he was free. He was a good boy, and he was home. He pulled away and looked at me, his eyes full of tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said, his voice a choked sob. "I should have never let her do that to you. I should have never stood by. I should have never let her take your home." "I know," I said, "but you're here now, and that's all that matters." We stood there for a moment, just hugging, the silence between us a comfort, a balm to the wounds that were still fresh. He finally pulled away and looked at me. "I found a new place," he said. It's small, but it's ours. It's a new beginning. I just smiled. He didn't know. He didn't know about the will. He didn't know that Jareth had saved us. I looked at him, and I saw the boy I had raised. The kind, quiet boy who loved this house. The boy who was finally home. There's something I need to tell you, I said. He just looked at me, a sense of fear in his eyes. He thought I was going to tell him something bad. He thought I was going to tell him that I was going to sell the house, that I was going to leave, but I wasn't. I was going to tell him the truth that Jareth had loved us so much, the truth that he had saved us, the truth that we had a home. I led him inside, and he walked through the house, his face a mask of shame and defeat. He saw the empty spaces on the walls, the places where my memories used to be. He saw the new furniture, the new art, the new towels. He saw the house that had been stolen from me. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes full of tears. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said, his voice a whisper. I'm so sorry. I went to the old wooden box, the one Jareth had left me, and I opened it. I took out the will. I handed it to him. He read it, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of a mix of emotions, surprise, shock, and a deep, profound sense of relief. He hugged me again. A long, tight, bone-crushing hug. He was a good boy. He had just been lost. He had been a prisoner, and now he was free. He was a good boy, and he was home. I stood on the porch, a few worn suitcases by my feet, but this time, they were not a symbol of defeat. They were a symbol of freedom. I looked at the house, the place that had been my home for 43 years, and I saw a new life, a new beginning. I looked at my son, and I saw a future that was filled with love, kindness, and forgiveness. A future that was ours to create. I was a person who had lost everything, and I was about to get it all back. I was going to get my life back, piece by piece, memory by memory. I was going to get it all back. I was going to get my life back, and I was going to do it for him. I was a person who had a secret that was going to change everything, a secret that was going to turn the tables, a secret that was going to give me my life back, a secret that was going to change everything. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was going to fight for my life.